Well, we're still with cross-profiling yet. I usually like to just dash through it and do it all in 2 sittings or 1, but people are really interested in it. It's something that's valuable. It's very difficult. And so if you're not getting it, or if it's not working for you in your consciousness, don't worry. Just keep right on going, because eventually it will. But it's very subtle. This week, while working on notes, I had it happen on 2 or 3 occasions that I had an insight into something, and I didn't note it down right away, and then when I wanted it later on, it was gone. So we're dealing with something that's subtle and difficult and hard to do. Maybe next time we'll have some student shots at it. Everybody sounds real excited about doing that. Yes. Now this time and next time, there's only going to be 2 more, only going to be this one and 1 more. I did the opposite of what I did for the first 8. In the first 8, I did the summation cross-profiling on the written part and did the individual cross-profiling on the oral part. In this case, and next time, we will do the general summation in the oral part, and the detailed activity we'll do in the written part. All right. We are at the chart of Yokiya Mishima. I've now read a fairly good biography of him, and I've got a lot of insights. I've got a whole bunch of biographies coming in and original works. Simone de Beauvoir has a 4-volume memoir of her life and philosophy. I don't know that I'm quickly going to dash through. All right. Let's first just do cross-profiling within the attitude cross-profiles in the Mishima chart. There are no imbalances in this chart in terms of excesses. But there are 2 deficiency profiles within the attitude profiles. That is number 3, which is low on fixed signs, and number 4, which is critically low on air signs. In fact, there are no air signs at all. This is an unusual combination. Everything about the man is unusual, because airy signs are often the most flighty signs, and they're subtle and they're kind of rare. And fixed signs, on the other hand, are the most stable and unbudgeable signs. So this cross profile indicates something out of the ordinary is taking place. He's trying to stay away from being flighty, but at the same time he's trying to stay away from being unchanging. And so what I wonder about this combination is if this lack of stick-to-itiveness is because he has a little intellectual curiosity. Not that he doesn't have ideas or philosophical insights into things, but he just doesn't like the comparison and contrast and massing large amounts of data. And because he hasn't learned to toy with that, maybe that's why he doesn't have the stick-to-it kinds of attitudes. If you think about it, to be without air signs is to be breathless. And if he's breathless with low fixed signs, that means there are a lot of cardinal and common sign planets, even though they're balanced between cardinal and common, which would mean a lot of change and a lot of change that occurred swiftly. So maybe he changes so much that he leaves himself intellectually or character-wise, he leaves himself to be breathless, trying to keep up with it all. You know, like it's sort of like an exhausting kind of life. The fact that he doesn't have a lot of planets, or that he has a deficiency in Aries signs, does that mean that he doesn't have the sense to settle down? Meaning to say, if he thought about his life more, that he would settle down and would have more of the fixed sign characteristics? What you're trying to do, that sounds a little far-fetched to me, but what we're trying to do is to theorize what these different things in the character mean. All right. Moving on. I don't mind him stealing all my thunder, and the lightning and everything else. Man, he deserves all the attention. The opportunity cross profiles. Now, they are very different than the attitude cross profiles, because almost every one of them has some kind of imbalance, though none of the imbalances is really severe. If you look at the number 5, the vertical profile, in the vertical profile he has a lot that's in the south. And in number 8, he chooses a lot of the less circumstantial houses for opportunities to work through. This means that he wants conditions that are where he can control the circumstances. So this looks like, putting the two together, it looks like he gets a lot of exposure in the world, but it also indicates that he wants to, and that he has the opportunities to change the world. So he wants to be a world changer. That's pretty clear. If you add in profile number 10, the triplicity profile, it shows that he is shy on professional goals. So what he wants to do out in the world to change it is not a professional thing to him, but it's much more a matter of his own enjoyment or of his own personal expression, because everything is in the expressive houses. The planets in the expressive houses equal all the 3 other categories put together. So this indicates something that society was a medium for him to express himself and try to change the circumstances. However, he was so expressive that he was an exhibitionist. He did all sorts of things that were attention-gathering, and it's kind of hard to change society seriously if you're mostly just an attention getter. Some people eventually thought, because he had pulled so many things before his harakiri, they thought it was just another, he's doing one of his things again, and they didn't think he was serious about his faithfulness to the emperor and all of that. When you look at number 6, it shows more planets west than east. And this is kind of funny, because from number 8 it shows that he wants to be able to control the circumstances, but he wants to control them, in this case it says, by reacting. He just reacts to the conditions of society and the conditions of society that he enjoys playing with. So this indicates maybe he doesn't have a great plan. If profile number 10 were number 6 were reversed, and he had a lot of things in the east, that would indicate somebody that had a great plan and was trying to change society in that way. But when he's merely reactive, he can't really do a lot to change society. If you look at number 9, that is an excess of planets in cadence signs. Now that is very difficult to understand. It's difficult to understand because cadency means that he has to act vicariously, that he works through others. Now, strangely enough, he had his own private army. Literally, he outfitted and kept an army all of his own, a militia that was all of his own, that he was training to fight with the left-wing students from his right-wing. He was not a financial right-winger. He was a traditionalist right-winger. He pledged his faithfulness to the emperor, which was a strange thing in his consciousness. So he had this private army through which he worked, but it wasn't a vicarious tool for him. It was much more of a toy. He did have to depend on others, because in the Japanese literary system, you could never be introduced into fine literary and publishing circles unless you had some sort of a mentor. And he had to have somebody to vicariously bring him in and advance his career. However, his relationship to his mentors vicariously was not circumstantial, but it was not overt either, so he couldn't really control them. So from all of this, one wonders why somebody who wanted to change the circumstances of society would work so indirectly, because it just goes counter to the very thing he's trying to do. And all I can see is that because he had this tendency to be vicarious and to be responsive rather than to be direct and to be initiatory, I think it's because he had these tendencies that he developed this strange mystique about the emperor, that the emperor was the epitome of society, but you mustn't question the emperor, and that everything that happened that was good in Japanese society happened by maintaining an attitude of obeisance toward the emperor. Needless to say, it was quite odd. This is not a consistent character. Obviously, somebody who commits suicide like that is not really consistent. All right, let's move down to the action profiles. In the action profiles, yes. The first, the fifth, and the ninth. The educational houses or the entertainment houses. Yeah. All right. He has in the action profiles, he has 3 imbalanced profiles, 11, 12, and 13. 12 and 13 are the only ones that stand out. And even these imbalances are difficult to understand. Normally, if a person has few tools, and 11 is pretty few aspects to have on a chart, they do that so that they can specialize and that they can put a lot of emphasis and be very, very strong about the tools that they do have. But here, he has few tools, and when you look at profile number 12, the vast majority of them are faint. So this is not logical or not easy to understand. We'll have some ideas about it, but not a whole lot. The other imbalance, number 13, is also interesting, because as we have seen in quite a few charts, when there are a lot of benign aspects or benefic aspects, it means benign behavior. But in this case, it doesn't mean benign behavior, because he really wasn't a benign man. It probably means perfected talents, or talents that could be applied with little resistance, good tools, but not necessarily good ends. Now, it would be nice to speculate that the low intensity applied with benign aspects would indicate that he could do things with a great deal of subtlety. They would be very fine, but they would be very faint. But I think that's a little bit far-fetched. I'm not sure. I might want to look into that if I were spending a lot of time with the chart.
Could it signify
Internalization, would you expand?
Well, he's got a low intensity. There's things going on, but he's not able to push them out enough into the world. And he doesn't have a lot of means of expression either because he has the low activity.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say. But this is true to his literary output. It was varied. It wasn't consistently the same. He wrote in several different styles of essays. He wrote in several different styles of novels. And he wrote very different kinds of plays. For several, he wrote no plays, and he wrote modern plays, and he wrote other kinds of plays. In fact, even like melodramas that were acted out just for excitement. So this is, maybe he was so talented because maybe he was so diverse because he had a lot of good talents, but they were so faint that he could just glide from one thing to another without getting stuck on one and being invariable. And maybe that was his intent. It's a very strange intent. All right, let's quickly look at the focus profiles. Number 16, the sun and moon are earthy, and the ascendant is fiery, which is sort of like that's sort of like a deficiency. And in the stage, he's at the second trine, but it's coming up to the second trine, but there is not actually an aspect there. And this leads one to wonder whether the internal struggle that he has is reflective of the time that he was born in. Meaning to say that things start going into decadence in the second stage of the moon. And if you look at 15, it isn't a great imbalance, but there are more second aspects than there are first. So maybe it is a quality that his struggle within himself is a reflection of the time that he is born in, and that he's sensitive to things that are breaking down. He certainly was sensitive to the breakdown of traditional Japan. He hated to see Japan leave its traditional ways and go into the commercial society that it has become now. So like his internal consciousness was reflective of what was going on outwardly. So maybe he is the beneficiary in that his character is like what's happening in society. All right, let's try to put together all of these big categories all together. If you look at the action category and the opportunity category, we can see we can get some idea of why there is some anemia in the action category. Meaning to say that very imbalanced in opportunities and not too imbalanced except for the two deficiencies in attitudes. He prefers to work with form, which is like the opportunities, rather than with life or with action. That is, he likes the opportunity profiles over the attitude profiles or over the action profiles. He stated openly many times his philosophy that the life or the action that one took was not as important as form. And that the life of society and the cultural movement of society was not as important as form. That's a strange outlook. For him, cultural form. Like for him, the form was that you have a society that is a samurai society, that you have a hierarchy, and that hierarchy has as its figure the epitome of all humanity, who is divine at the same time, and that is the emperor. And it isn't important that people are prosperous. What in taking action, what is important is that they're true to the form of living in the imperialistic society. He even thought it was in the Japanese character to go to war, and that the form of Japan was lost when it took a constitution after the war that it would no longer go to war. And he thought that this was a defeating of the form of the Japanese character, and he thought that was all wrong. He had some sort of an unchangeable archetypal notion of what society was supposed to be for each culture.
Some of the French at the same time.
Yes, he was very sympathetic to a lot of French writers.
If you look at it as being influenced by the French, a lot of the things you say are no longer strange.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier that just can't let go. You talked something about cadence. You said, or the cadence house.
Yes, are vicarious. They are experiences where you gain, or the beneficiaries of you gain secondhand. The cadence houses are like the third house, where you learn something not directly by experience, but by reading about it. Or where you get something done by servants in the sixth house, rather than doing it yourself. Or by figuring out theoretically that this must be the case with the ninth house. Or by the divine figure of things with the 12th house. Okay?
So, and you're saying that there's an imbalance there?
Yes. He has...
You're using the houses then, not the signs.
That's right.
Okay. That's all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. We all right.
You said something about first, fifth, and ninth.
Yes.
Did you mean that?
Those are expressive educational expressive houses, educational houses, or entertainment houses, or houses of expansion. So the attitude profiles have some import, but they're not as important as form. Form is the all. When you look at the focus, you see the overall, because the focus profiles indicate the overall of everything. It indicates that he is conflicted, because both soul and spirit are in earth, which is the most formal attitude of all. But in the body, which is itself a form, he prefers action, with Aries on the ascendant and Mars not far from the ascendant in Aries. So there's sort of like a flip-over inconsistency. So what we're seeing about the man is that not only are there odd, unpredictable, and in some cases unexplainable reasons for choosing the combinations he does, but he's a very inconsistent man, and that's about all that you can say. And in that inconsistency, things have to be erroneous. He didn't even want all the intellection that would find out his inconsistencies. He was not one that would debate. He did debate the left-wing students openly, but when he did so, he debated not on the basis of logic, which you would expect from an Aries sign person, but he debated with them on the idea of form and on the idea of shocking them with rhetorical devices, because that was his forte. That's where he was really strong. All right. Ethel Barrymore.
What you said, that as you go down the chart, it's more important.
Yes.
So that's, in other words, the phase of the moon is the most important.
The focus profiles are overall things, but I would say that the action profiles are more important than the opportunity, and the opportunity more than the attitude. The focus more or less is trying to tie everything all together. This is not something that we're doing that you can easily compartmentalize, because even some of the notions of excesses or deficiencies aren't really excesses or deficiencies, but we're just using that lingo to get at what is implied or what can be inferred from given situations. All right.
One other question.
Yep.
I'm not sure exactly what the phase one is, first and second. I know what applying and separating is, but then
Phase is any two planets that are in aspect with each other can be in first phase or they can be in second phase. If you take the sun and moon as the basis of it all of the aspects that happen from the new moon until the exact full moon are called first phase aspects. And everything that happens from full moon to new moon is second phase aspect. The first phase aspects build, the second phase aspects take apart and analyze or reflect. And if you take any two planets that are in aspect, and the slowest moving one you put in the place of the sun, and the faster moving one in the place of the moon, and then you can tell whether they're in first or second phase, saying like, well, if these planets were the sun and moon, what phase would it be in the lunation cycle? And that gives you the phase of the aspect. All right.
It's like the difference between the universe expanding and the universe imploding. Is it coming back together, or is it blowing apart?
What about the opposition of the conception?
The opposition up until the exact is first phase, and after the exact it's second phase. Same thing with the conjunction. Right out of the gate it's first phase, and coming back home it's second phase. The slowest one always takes the place of the sun, and the fastest one always takes the place of the moon.
You don't put it in the place on the chart. He means place in the sense of the relationship between one and the other.
Yeah, she gets. All right. Looking at the attitude cross profiles in the Barrymore chart. All right. Number 2, she has more in negative signs than in positive signs, and she has, in number 4, she has a lot in the earthy signs and very little in the Aries sign. In both cases, there is an excess that goes along with a deficiency, which is a little bit different than what we saw with Mishima. We saw some excesses without deficiencies, where everything was spread out over several things. And so the kinds of things that I wonder about with this is whether she chooses the earthy signs for their stability and form, and whether she does that as because she needs something to keep her from, looking at the polarity, to keep her from overplaying roles. Meaning to say that she intentionally downplays herself to not overplay a role, and that she settles for working on the form rather than on the expression. She probably chooses reception in the polarity profile because she needs that impressionability. And she probably needs that because she hasn't got the interest to intellectually figure things out. So instead of doing things intellectually, she takes it by impressions. All of the negative signs are more impressionistic. They either receive or hold an impression from anything that acts on them. So she gets something of a studied appreciation of things by being receptive, especially in the earthy signs. And so she has sacrificed intellection perhaps for impression, which is another way of looking at the same thing. Very quickly, looking at the opportunity cross profiles. 3 have balances, number 6, number 8, and number 9. are balanced. That is, the horizontal, the circumstantiality, and the angularity are balanced. The other three are imbalanced. That is, the vertical, the quadrant, and the 10 are imbalances. The ones that are balanced are very closely balanced. There are a couple of them there with exact 5 5s. So all the balances really stand out, while the imbalances are not really too strong. So to get the feel of this person with relation to opportunities, they have enough imbalances for differentiation, but none of them are severe, and there's so many other balances that this is not a highly imbalanced person. There are only 2 deficiency imbalances, number 5 and number 7, and only 1 sure excess imbalance, and that's number 5, with all those planets in the south. And there's 1 borderline excess, which is number 7, which is a lot of planets in the 4th quadrant. So all of this indicates pretty definitive choices about opportunities. And the ones that are imbalanced should stand out pretty clearly, because everything around it would be like putting a mountain in the middle of the plains rather than in the middle of a mountain range, because it would stand out clearly in that way. The lack of opportunities to express, educate, expand, enjoy is very strange. Very few planets there. That's very strange for an actress. You'd expect that this is somebody that would want everything for expression. But maybe not having much opportunity to take care of her personal needs, like that 0 in the profile number 7, leads to it. That she's so far removed from taking care of herself that even expressing herself isn't important. Perhaps she sacrificed both. But if she did sacrifice both, what did she sacrifice it to? You look at number 10, the answer becomes pretty clear. She sacrificed it to have plenty of opportunities to interact with others as equals. Meaning to say this, if she were a ball player, she would be a ball player that would make others look good around her, because she would be a team player, because the interactions with others as equals was very important to her. And if she did express herself really strongly, that equality and the camaraderie that she had with other people in acting would be lost. Probably that was more important to her than expression or than a personal life. Because the wider world, looking at number 5 and number 7, which indicates a lot in the big, wide, macrocosmic world, is very strong, she forgets all of her personal petty needs, and her interactions with others as equal is sort of the only thing that she has that's tangible, that relates her to the macrocosmic world and having that very big perspective. And so that's why some of those things would be cut back that way. All right. Looking at the action cross profile, there is only one that really stands out, and that is number 15, the phase profile. So she's much more likely to be constructive than deconstructive, to use the modern terms. And there are a couple of mild imbalances. She has few tools, but she chooses pleasant or perfected or favorable actions over unfavorable. So the whole profile put together seems like a really positive, building view toward action, taking actions that build rather than the actions that rend, but that it's conservative in the numbers of actions that she takes, and she maintains a gradated sense of touch. We see that from the intensity profile number 12. There's nothing out of balance there, and she is balanced about increasing and decreasing tendency. So she's got good talents, not a whole bunch of them, and they're used to building. So this is not somebody who would take actions that would isolate other people or make other people look bad. And if you want to begin jumping ahead, relating that to the fact that she looks for interactions with others as equals as being highly important, this would say that her actions are consistent with her values as far as the kinds of opportunities that she has specialized in. Yes?
I have two questions. They are related to each other, but they might not be related exactly to what you're saying.
That's all right.
But I noticed something here. First of all, the trines of Neptune and Mars with Mercury. The fact that they're not trine to Uranus, but Uranus is conjunct to Mercury, is there a third-party relationship there? And the reason I asked the question is because you were wondering about her training or whatever, that she didn't choose any. If Uranus is the planet of intuition, and it's conjunct with Mercury, she might get up, and Uranus is basically in its home house, so it's not in its home sign. I was wondering if that might be why she didn't go for any training.
I won't answer those questions. The reason being that belongs in detailed analysis. And indeed, we'll do plenty of that in detailed analysis. That's what most people do in most astrology, and the majority of this class is going to be that. And that's certainly going to come up somewhere along the line. But when we're looking at the general blocking out of the character in the large, that's inappropriate, and it takes us off of the scale of things that we're trying to do things on. All right. Looking at focus profiles. In the number 16, in the agreement profile, she's clearly imbalanced. And in the stage profile, she is in a very peculiar place. She's at the end of a cycle when things are moving toward dissolution and almost fatally going down the drain. So she's positive inwardly in spirit, and she's positive outwardly in outer personality, but in the internalization and in the externalization, she holds up. Perhaps these two profiles put together is that she senses the end of the theater as she knew it growing up as a child and for many years beforehand. She senses that and sees that and is part of that. You know, we still do have theater, but it certainly doesn't have the place in society that television has, which wasn't even around when she was there, and it doesn't have the place that radio had. The theater used to reach everyone until radio came along. You know, either the theater or lectures were big things. Like I would have been great in the Chautauqua times because then everybody liked to hear talks. But so now I'm sort of anachronistic. So because she senses that things are going down, the fact that the moon is in Cancer and makes it look like there's some sort of sentimentality, and she's trying to savor things, you know, like she's trying to hold the soup in her mouth before it gets transported for digestion, or doing the same thing with vomit if it's going the other direction. It's Halloween. I can get away with it. You heard about the two street guys, and you see this bum come out of a pizza joint. The drunk, he comes out of a pizza joint. He's been out drinking, and he went for a pizza, and he can't handle it. He walks out of the pizza joint, and he just pukes it all out. And one street person says to the other, "Oh, goody, a warm meal." I admit it's gross. It's tasteless. Maybe it's such a thing that she sees the end of the theater and she can see that this may be the last call and she wants to go out with it. She did do several movies. I think she did 3 movies, but she didn't care for the medium at all. But she recognized that the theater was going to be a second-class thing, and while she was there, yet she was near it at its end before everybody was crowding into the movie theaters, and she knew it was going to be a big finale for it. Maybe she had butterflies in her stomach about doing it. That's a possible meaning of that. All right, I'll try to put it all together. 1/3 of the profiles are unbalanced. It means 2/3 are in balance, which is pretty balanced. None of the most general tendencies has more imbalance than balance. So she appears to be temperate overall. In the majority of things in life, she keeps a steady, even balance. And in the attitudes, the forms of experience, and in the action and central focus, she's pretty much temperate. So she's a woman of the world, and she serves it, but she does so by not standing out and by being part of the troupe or part of the company. And those kinds of values were important to her. And if somebody is a Leo and does something like that, that's saying quite a bit. Because Leos, usually have to let you know within the first 5 minutes after you met them, I'm a Leo.
You said she kept it quiet, or however? What was
We saw that when we were looking at some of the earlier profiles in the opportunities and in the attitudes. She tried to not do things that stood out too much, but that her values were more for her peers, relations with others as equals. All right, William Butler Yeats. Who's? No, Yeats is Gemini. All right, when we look at the attitude cross profiles, we see that almost all of them are imbalanced. Number 2, number 3, and number 4 are all imbalanced. And number 2 and number 4 are strongly imbalances. They stand out. And they are matching. The polarity has to be matching, but the element has one excess that is extreme and one deficiency that is about as extreme as you can get, with 0. So we can say about him that his attitude patterns or his attitude profiles in general are clear-cut. And a lot was in the Aries signs. So he prefers intellectual activity above all else. And because of that, because he's positively in control of his thinking and because he likes thinking about things, it keeps him from negativity. which would be, which is what indication of what number 2, profile number 2 is. It says very little that's negative there. His intellectual occupation, on the other hand, did keep him from being receptive. If you're talking, or if you're writing, or if you're thinking all the time, it gives you very little opportunity to be receiving from others. And in complement with that, this is an interesting side to his life, his receptivity came through his wife, who was so sensitive and receptive that she was a medium. And she had entities take over her and write things through her body. And things that he would later on philosophize about, and which he carried quite far, both in his writing in the essay on the what were they called, the antinomies. I have to be very careful because there is the metal that is antimony, and there are antimonies, which are opposites, intellectual opposites. So at any rate, his intellectual occupation kept, which he left to his wife. Also, we can see that in his attitudes, his extreme intellectuality dried him up. He was not an emotional person, but he was probably cool enough in his Aries sign things that if he were around emotional people, that he wouldn't freak out about it, because he was that cool. So it facilitated extroversion, and he could state himself, and he could do so without being too stylized or without being too sentimental, which are factors that would have come in if watery signs had been strong. All right, opportunity profiles. Now we're going along at a nice fast speed that I like to go. All right. In these profiles, there are as many balances as there are imbalances, but they're not extreme like the attitude profiles are, with one exception, and that's number 8. He likes circumstances that he can control. Now, this is just the opposite. In many ways, this character is the opposite of Mishima. Mishima did things out in the world, but he had little intellect and was willing to be a victim or a carrier out of things that were circumstantial. Yeats is not out in the world. He's in the little private zone. Most of the planets are beneath the Earth. And he is highly airy and highly mental, and he wants to deal with circumstances that he can control. He wants to control the circumstances of his life. He's not out to change society like Mishima was. He's trying to change his life because everything is in the northern hemisphere. So he wants to be master of things that are his and not of the world. When you add in number 7 and find everything in the, of so many planets, half of the planets in the first quadrant where you'd expect a quarter of them, it indicates that he wants control of his personal needs, his personal responsibilities. That's his main focus in life. When you bring in number 10 and see that he has a lot of planets in relational houses to others as equals, this is something like the Barrymore chart, he wants to control his experiences so that he can be responsible to his friends or to his peers or to other equals. It isn't that he really shuns the universal sphere to get his work done, because he doesn't have much in professional houses, and he doesn't retreat into the personal sphere to solve problems, but only to share. He has to have something from his personal nature to share from. All right, looking quickly at the action profiles. Number 11, which is toward the high end, stands out a little bit, but there aren't any other really standout imbalances in his action. That means there's little cross-profiling we can do. We can say that he uses gradated intensity to things that he does, and that in his writing he both builds up and relaxes tension, which is very nice. If you listen, Yeats' poems aren't so much to be read as they are to be chanted or to be sung. He really had that Irish quality about him. Ela has heard those two poems on that those CDs that I have. And when he reads his poems, it's like singing them. And he is more of a builder than he is a tear-downer or a deconstructor, but none of those things are stand out. He does things probably more toward benign ends, and he wants low friction actions, but that isn't really strong either. All you can say is that he's liberal in the choice of actions and the number of actions that he takes, and that he's balanced and tempered in all of the actions he takes. Looking at the focus profiles in general do not lend themselves toward the concept of balance. Other profiles, especially the opportunity and attitude profiles, you can see balances and imbalances. You could see, for example, looking at number 16, the agreement, you could see that it's almost an excess of air, but that wouldn't be quite exactly correct. Probably, to look at the two focus profiles together, the most that you can say is that the whole chart has a quality, or the general of the chart has a quality of smoothness and of fleetness, and that the overall character is like the wind. It just flows quite easily. With all of the trine activity in the stage and in the agreement, it is a matter of him doing mostly perfecting work, and perfecting work toward ends that are of a spiritual nature, since the trine is of a spiritual nature. And so this is probably very purposeful as far as the overall focus of it is concerned. Now, trying to put it all together, two of the categories are balanced. The other two have some imbalance, but none of it is severe. Except for the element profile, which is the only really standout one, it's probably better that we don't do a lot of category cross-profiling, but more summation instead. So you can just say it in one word. His character is balanced, but I won't ever say it in only one word, I guess. He's wide open to bringing things in and taking things out. That is, the agreement is like that. But he prefers putting things out because of the polarity. Most of his talents are positive and even in use and quite numerous. So he's pretty much positive in attitude, positive in action, and positive in the general nature of the chart. He wants to control his circumstances, so this is a positive life. This is an old soul. The fact that he was drawn to Neoplatonism and theosophy and higher spiritual things is because he is an old soul. He's ripe and he has brought a lot of things to perfection. And among them are very humanistic values. He realizes that in spirit we're all equal. And that the human thing is his interest. Oh, he does delve into literature and politics, but toward human ends. Since our lives and our characters are our greatest creations, this whole general category cross profiling indicates that all of his creation is balanced and measured and perfecting. Again, all saying that like this is an advanced kind of individual, or at least for this life he is. I think you ought to pass the ears to the person behind you. You don't get nostalgic? That was another lifetime. All right. Yeah, she was a bunny. The only bunny that I've ever known. How do you like that? Yes. Oh, come on. All right, we're looking at the last chart for tonight. Shirley MacLaine. Yeah. The more I see the chart, the more I like it. I'm not so sure I understand it all. Looking at the attitude cross profiles. This is just about as close as you can come to having the attitude cross profiles so perfectly balanced that they can't be more perfectly balanced. If you took the right one, if you took one planet and moved it from Earth to either fire or water, she would be perfectly in balance. Nice, healthy person. Does it mean somebody who is supremely advanced? I don't know, but it's something nice and healthy. She's not going to come at you with nothing but air and more air, but she's going to come at you with emotion and more emotion all the time. Looking at the opportunity cross profiles, there is some imbalance, but none of it is extreme. If we look at the circumstantiality profile, number 8, saying that she's willing to accept circumstances, the opportunities of circumstances that can't be changed, the more faded one. And if you look at that with the number 5, the vertical profile where she has most in the south, you get an image of someone who is destined to be out in society, and she's willing to go along with what the society and the world has for her. She doesn't fight. She doesn't resist. She goes with the flow in terms of opportunities. If you look at the triplicity profile, number 10, she's got the 5 planets in problem-solving houses, and that's half of them. And if you put that together with number 5, you get an image of somebody that's interested in solving the world's problems, and somebody who retreats to do so. But the retreats aren't personal retreats, but they're retreats into sort of the unconscious of the world. If you take these all together, it seems a bit puzzling. Because here's somebody that's willing to solve the problems of the world, but also somebody that's willing to go along with the flow of the world and to dwell within circumstances that are not always in her control. So this is not an active problem solver. So when I put that all together, I get the feeling of somebody who is recognizes things as faded and destined, and that sees problems, but with an attitude of the problems are solved by living through them, accepting what's there, seeing them for what they are, and then you can solve them. Something along that line is the way I think it works. Looking at the action cross profile, everything but the intensity is pretty much balanced. Quality is a little bit imbalanced, and quality and intensity are the only ones that have much imbalance at all. Everything else is middle of the road. So if you cross-profile the two of those, you get to see somebody who has mostly benign aspects. And those are mostly mild aspects. Now, if you put that together, somebody who takes actions that are good or positive or perfected or pleasant and they're mild, I don't think that amounts to damning somebody by false praise. I don't think that that's true to her. And I don't think it means a weak talent, because she's not a weak talent. Because if you see her acting, she's quite good at acting. I think that what it is hinted at back in the opportunity profiles with all of that withdrawal. There is the factor that is all important, that is astrologically invisible. And that is the free will that goes beyond astrology. And it likes working with tools that are not too well defined and that give a lot of latitude for how they're going to be used. So if a person is balanced in action, one can afford more leeway. But if everything is out of balance, intensity could be critical. What we're saying here is that she's so much of a middle-of-the-road person, and if you've got a lot of imbalances and there's also a lot of intensity, those imbalances are going to have you jerking from one side to another. And she has chosen not to work that way. Looking at the focus profiles, in this case, the corridor for internalizing and externalizing, that is the agreement profile. Everything is in perfect agreement. Everything is in the same element. And there is a trine between the sun and the moon, so that the stage or the phase of the heavens when she was born is a very positive thing. It's a very building time. So like she's in touch with the times, and in herself the flow from within out and from without in is very good. The emphasis of these dual harmonies is more likely to be based on accomplishing, because it is a first trine that is in the stage profile. And because it is earthy, it's like saying this is the person with the right stuff at the right time. And so like the big overall, this big overall focus profiles agree with almost everything else, that there is basically a general balance, and this is again a person of the times that's willing to go along with the needs of the world at the time that she was born into, because that's true to her character. All right. Now trying to put the categories together. If we look at the agreement profile, that is number 16 in the focus profile, that's sort of a generalization of the attitude profiles. most especially the element profile. And number 17, the stage profile, is sort of a stopped action generalization of the action profiles, most especially number 15, the phase profile. So if we try to put this together, the fact that the agreement and all of the attitudes are similar, and the stage and all of the actions are similar, like lump sums of each other, we see that this is sort of a generalized case that the general focus is like two of the major facets of life, saying that there's all kinds of agreement in this. Interesting that both of the focus tests and the categories that they represent, that is the attitude and action, are very balanced. So as a consequence, this has all kinds of, what I'm trying to get at is that there are all kinds of internal and overall balances where there are cross-checks, so that this is an exceedingly symmetric character. So the broadest of the broad and two of the categories are altogether positive, altogether giving someone as somebody who tries to keep things stabilized and balanced. Maybe this is why she was willing to accept imbalanced opportunities that indicate going along with the world, because she didn't want to fight the world. And even when she did odd things like become interested in New Age philosophy, she was almost apologetic about it, because she didn't want to fight the world. She was, like for her generation, she was sort of the darling of a whole generation. She was so pleasant and represented what they wanted. That's about as much as I have. Yes. Yep. The trine is always indicates spirit, whereas the square always indicates matter. The trine is the least number of lines that is necessary to have an objectified space with an interior and an exterior, but it is not a measurable space without the square. The square represents measurement, and that is like the proving ground or the testing ground of the material world. And therefore the ease, the spirit does everything with ease and with no internal resistance, whereas in matter everything is accomplished by the war of the elements. And so a lot of things being trined up indicates spirit, and a lot of things being squared up indicates being material or measuring it. No, I wasn't experiencing. I'm trying to be good about that. All right. I understand this is not the most joyful kind of thing that everybody likes to do. All right, we have only one more session of doing this, and then we go into the big section on estimations, and then after that it will be astrology, as everybody knows astrology, only with far more depth and detail than you'll probably get almost anywhere else. So like we have one more of the cross profilings, and then we go into the estimation of strengths of planets and strengths of aspects, and how you can weigh what's more important than what, and what is less likely to happen, what is more likely to happen. And then when we've got that information, we can delve into the character with great depth and do so with an assurity that we're always going to be in the ballpark. These are the written versions of everything we did tonight. They're probably much better than what was in the oral, because it's more the... No, it is. Because it points more to specific things. It's specific cross-profiling throughout the whole thing. What? What? No. No.
Richard, what if you have a lot of planets in the problem-solving houses, especially the fourth house? What would that mean? Would that mean that you want to solve a lot of personal problems?
Yes. That is what you use to change your habits, to clear yourself of all kinds of subconscious residue, and do things like that.
Could you also be a counselor then, too?
Only if there's an aspect of those planets to something outside. The reason being that if it's only that house, it turns out to be way too subjective, and you keep seeing yourself in others. But if things in the fourth house relate to something like in the seventh or eighth house, then the way you solve your experience can be applied to the way other people solve their experience, and there's a way that you can get outside of yourself. But otherwise, the fourth house by itself alone is tremendously subjective.
What if it relates to the first house or the fifth house from the fourth house?
If it related to the first house, it would have to do with how all of that material got there in the first place. Probably from early childhood traumas or from things picked up in the environment in the external world that have been personalized and that have not been cleared out. Relation to the fifth house is what is passed on from parent to child, and some of that is good and some of that is not good. It would probably be better for self-expression than it would be for counseling. For counseling, I would rather see it either something in the west or something in the south.
So for like counseling, you just like the eighth house is really important for
Mm-hmm.
what it's called?
Yeah. Like I've seen the 12th house be situations where you can solve your personal problems by seeing how they're solved in the world and following that. Or taking the way you solve your problems and then externalizing that and extrapolating it to society at large.
So the fourth house, you just be too involved with your own stuff to help other people that well.
Yes. Yep.
And a certain degree of unconsciousness.
Yes. It all depends on what planets are there, though. I've had to deal with several charts now where there are planets in the where the octave planets are transiting fourth houses of people, and they're discovering things inside of themselves, about themselves, and bringing things to consciousness, and they don't even realize that it's themselves. And it was so long ago, or the impressions have undergone such metamorphosis, almost like metamorphic rock. When it gets depressed way down, it gets turned into some crystalline something else, and they don't recognize it when it is discovered. Does anybody want either one of the CDs for Romeo and Juliet? Huh? We're doing Romeo and Juliet in the... Jerry, would you see that Heidi gets one of those? Yes. I don't know. I haven't looked much into that, but I seem to think that that's maybe what Destiny wanted when Wellstone went down. That we need to experience something from the right for a while, but I don't know. Yeah. It looks for right now. It looks like more like that. If that was the case, it's backfiring. Yeah, because Mondale has a significant lead now, where Wellstone only had a small lead.
Regressing. We're going to just replace all of our. We're just going to have all the old guys come back. Same band all over again.
I wouldn't feel bad about Jimmy Carter coming back. I think enough of Jimmy Carter that I think he might even be able to to get the people in Palestine to work together.